them like guinea pigs. I take them places and we see whether we think it's going to get good HeyGo content or not. But each guide is different. Right, now, I will probably use terms that were used at the time, so please don't be offended by anything that comes out of my mouth, because I'm not trying to offend you. It's just some of these stories go back to the 1400s and things, so you have to I'm kind of using the language of the time as well. Like I say, it's probably not great for children, this one, because there's a couple of adult themes that come in that I will use, so just bear that in mind if you've got any young people watching. Okay, I think I've covered everything now, so I'm going to turn you around. The map is on, whether you want to use it or not, I'm not sure. So we are on Edinburgh Castle Esplanade, and we're starting up at the castle because there's been people living here since, well, for at least 3,000 years, and it just kind of makes sense. Now, the first ghost I'm going to talk to you about, if you've been on my other tours, you've probably heard of this lady, and it is the Grey Lady, who we believe is Janet Douglas, Lady Glams. Now, she was a victim of a very vengeful King James V, who hated her brother because he'd been his stepfather and been really bad to him, and he decided he was going to destroy the entire clan kind of thing, and Lady Grey was one of his victims. Now, she was a noblewoman, she was very well respected, and unfortunately the king got his own way in the end, and she was burned alive on the castle esplanade in front of her 16-year-old son, and this was back in the 1500s, 1537. Now, the Grey Lady has been seen wandering in various parts of the castle, including the prison area, and it sounds like she's weeping. There's often this weeping sound that follows the Grey Lady. Sometimes you see her, or sometimes you might just hear this sad weeping coming from her. Yeah, the things that people do to each other back in the past, and even today, just blows your mind. It really does, how awful human beings can be. Now, another explanation for the Grey Lady, sorry, the wind's catching the gimbal there, sorry about that. Another explanation for the Grey Lady is it may well be Mary of Guise. Now, Mary of Guise was Mary Queen of Scots' mother, and Mary of Guise found herself basically on the wrong side of the religious Reformation in Scotland, and when she died in June 1560, her corpse was kept in the castle for months. It was wrapped in a cloth and kept in a lead coffin to help with the smell. Yeah, lovely. Because obviously it would be decomposing. And then after months, her body was finally allowed to leave the castle and be shipped to France. Absolutely awful. Again, I mean, the woman was dead. Why would you refuse to let the body go back to where she came from? It's just, it blows your mind what people do to each other, you know? Just going to let you have a little look over the edge here. Now, another story we have is of a headless drummer boy in the castle. And as we look over, I'm just showing you down so you can see how high up we are. And that white building is George Heriot's school, for anybody that's curious. Now the car has moved. I'm bringing you round so that you can get this beautiful moon. Okay, I'm just going to let you... Oh, now there's another one coming at us. Now anyway, the Headless Drummer Boy. One of the best known ghosts associated with the castle. And he's headless. It's a scary figure, as you can imagine. And he seems to be drumming. And the drumming is a warning. So whenever he drums, it's a warning that the castle is going to be under attack. Now, fortunately, the last time we heard him drumming was in the 1650s when the castle was attacked by Oliver Cromwell. Since then, we've not actually really heard the Headless Drummer Boy, but it's one of those stories that's handed down through the generations. If you hear this boy drumming, or you see him on the battlements, you know the castle is going to be under attack. Fortunately, we've moved forward in history, and the chances of that happening is slim. Now, we also have tunnels that run from the castle down under the esplanade and down into the old town. Okay? And these tunnels were sort of discovered a couple of hundred years ago now, and the network of they were discovered when they were looking. Most of them are leading towards the old town and towards the palace. Now, it was very common back in history where you would have trying to think, Dalmeny House. Is it Dalmeny? No. It's the House of the Binns. The House of the Binns in West Lothian, which is just outside Edinburgh, they have a tunnel that leads from the House of the Binns to Blackness Castle. Okay, so there's lots of these secret tunnels all over the place. But Edinburgh Castle, you want secret tunnels so that you can come and go, you know? So we have these tunnels, and in order to determine where the tunnels led, a piper was sent down the tunnels with orders to keep playing his pipes. So as he's playing his pipes, people were above ground listening to the sound coming through the ground and following him down the Royal Mile. And they got down Castle Hill, they went into the Lawn Market, they followed the sound. As soon as it came to the Tron Church, that's when it stopped. It stopped dead. They went back up to the top, waiting for the piper to come out. He didn't come out. So they sent a rescue party down into the tunnel to find the piper. But soon they came back out because they realised that he'd simply vanished in the tunnel without a trace. Nobody knew where the piper was. And at that point they decided to seal the tunnels up. Now, on a quiet night in the Royal Mile in the dark, you can sometimes hear the sound of a piper playing. And it's not one of the buskers because they all go away, but occasionally you'll hear a piper playing. Now, we have another story which is related to the castle. Again, we've so many of these because it's been there for such a long time. This one's a modern story though. So in 2003, there was a group of workmen who had been performing sort of restoration to the castle, and they claimed that they had seen several orbs. So an orb is like a round sort of floating sort of see-through ball, like a bubble but thicker, you know, that kind of thing. And they had claimed to see these several orbs. These orbs took the shape of a hazy blue floating orb, and it above their heads. Now this caused the men to be kind of nervous, and they actually refused to go into the prison and into the Queen Anne building alone. They would only go in pairs. They wouldn't work alone because of the orbs. And the orbs, they think, are associated probably with prisoners from the Napoleonic War period. That story is actually quite a famous one. It was in the newspapers, but Historic Scotland, you can actually find it in their magazine as well, about these poor men that got terrified by the orbs. Now, Edinburgh Castle held lots and lots of prisoners, and if we go back in history a little bit further, one of the prisoners was, we think in the 1600s he was held in the castle, and at that point we had dung collectors that would come along, collect all the sewage, take it away, and then fertilise the fields with it. So this prisoner decided that he was going to hide himself within the dung barrow when nobody was looking, and that he would, when the dung barrow was taken out of Edinburgh to be poured onto the fields for fertiliser, at that point he would make his escape. Now, unfortunately for him, the day that he chose to do this, the dung collector was a particularly lazy man, and the poor guy, instead of being taken to the fields, the dung collector basically took him to the edge of the esplanade and poured the dung out there, which then his body was smashed on the rocks below, and unfortunately he didn't survive. Now, when you're in the castle and you're standing up, looking over the edge, there's lots of places where you can get really good views. There's a particular place near the Half Moon Battery, which I'll just come round and show you, that people stand and they say that they can smell raw sewage, okay? They get this very strong smell of sewage, and then they get this feeling like they're being pushed or drawn forward over the edge. And that has happened. That's been reported several times. And we think it's the prisoner who died. The dung prisoner. Right, we're going to head down the hill slightly. We could actually just spend the whole night talking about all the different ghost stories that are in the castle. It's because there's so many. There's also the military mascot's grave where the soldiers' dogs are buried. And very often, at night when the castle was garrisoned, soldiers, when they were patrolling the castle, whenever they came near that area, they would hear the dogs barking. They'd hear dogs barking. But when they went to investigate, there was never any dogs. And they think it was the military mascots, the ghosts of the military mascots. Isn't that beautiful? I've got a story I'll tell you when I get further down of something that happened to me, and I have no explanation for it. So it's basically take it whatever way you think. Yeah, the military mascot's grave's actually, it's a really interesting little burial ground. Now, just ahead of us, this area on the Esplanade, this is where we worried witches. So there was, per head of population, we worried more witches than anywhere else in Scotland. So the buildings ahead of us here, the Witchery restaurant, it has sort of a hotel with sort of quirky rooms, like one's done up like a library and all this kind of thing, and they have several ghost stories associated with them. I actually had a lady that I picked up on tour, and she'd been staying at the Witchery, and I picked her up and I was like, oh, how was your night, blah blah blah. She said, oh, it was fine. She said, except when I was in bed and I felt somebody sitting in the bed next to me. And I was like, I thought, she was joking at first. And she went, no, blah, blah. And then she started to tell me the story, and I was like, that is mind-blowing. I will not be staying at the Witchery, that is for sure. Yes. It's, Edinburgh has so many ghost stories, and it's not just the Old Town, all over. Now, the black dog at the castle, I'm just going to quickly bring you around so we can look back up. So the black dog, there's a dog that barks as well, and it's a black dog that the soldiers have also actually physically seen, running about in the castle, and as they look at the dog they think he's real. They don't realise that he's not actually there. So yeah. Oh, we've got something going on here. Just let you see it. This is the side of the camera obscura. We're getting a beautiful night for it, people. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now, I mentioned Major Weir on my darker side, but I'm just going to quickly go over some of the things with Major Weir. Major Weir, he was executed in 1670 for incest, bestiality, and communicating with the dead and other crimes. Now, his empty house was known to be haunted with... it was known to be haunted by the locals because people... Oh, would you go back to the witch? There you go. That's it just there. Yeah, so it was known to be haunted. People would see lights at the windows. They would see strange figures moving around inside and eerie music. There was also, people would comment on the fact that they could hear music coming from it as well. Now, the house itself was demolished in 1878. What a shame. I wish we had kept that one. It was demolished in 1878. Recently, though, it has been discovered that parts of the house and the basement ground floor level were actually incorporated into the new building, which is the Quaker Meeting House. Now, a man dressed in black with a black hat, a black cloak, has been seen walking through the wall in the ground floor bathroom. He's been seen quite a few times doing that. So it's been witnessed by more than, a couple of people. Now, if you happen to be around the West Bow, which is just ahead of us, West Bow, Upper Bow area, and you hear the tapping of a staff on the cobbles, you better be careful, because that sound with a shadowy figure has been associated with Major Weir. People have heard it, tap, tap, tap as he's walking. Major Weir his staff was quite well known, and Major Weir's staff was a gift from the devil, and it's often been seen carrying a lantern in front of his master. So the staff goes ahead of him with this lantern, and you see Major Weir walking behind it. Oh yes, yeah. Emily's just mentioned there, we're not actually going to get down to the palace tonight, but there's ghost stories in the palace as well, and where David Rizzio, Mary Queen of Scots' Italian secretary, was murdered and his body was left on the floor, there is a blood stain that keeps reappearing. Every time they get rid of it or they change the floor, this red stain to the wood happens again. So it's quite an interesting one. Now, Major Weir's house was just down here, so the Quaker Meeting House is just at the bottom where that lamp is to the left. So Sunday night, sleeping early for the work tomorrow. I'm actually quite lucky. My first tour is 2:00 tomorrow, so yeah, I'm a lucky girl. The building with the red door is a church. You'll see lots of churches here have red doors. There's a church there, and we've just walked past another church there. Now, in this area, we have the ghost of Johnny One Arm. I do tell the story. I am going to go over it a little bit because the last time I didn't actually go into it properly, and I just told you about the sightings. People were a bit confused. So Johnny One Arm was a man who decided that he wanted to get divorced, and he took his wife, went to the divorce courts to have it done, and it was George Lockhart, the Lord President of the anyway, he was presiding over the case and found in favour of the wife, and gave her £93 per annum, which in the 1600s it was equivalent to £80,000 a year. Bearing in mind, Cheesley had wanted to dump his wife and his 11 children, pay them nothing, so he was really angry with the judge, and he told the judge that he had to fix the problem or he would attack him in kirk or market, so in church or market. Then the judge didn't hear anything from him for a while. Everybody thought everything had calmed down, and on Easter Sunday, George Lockhart, the president of the Court of Session, went to St Giles for Easter service, and he bumped into a man on the way, and he didn't recognise him, but he had a face and you thought, oh, I've seen him somewhere, and it was like, good morning, and everything was fine. But what he didn't realise was that was Cheesley. And then Cheesley waited and followed him all the way back to his house, where the scaffolding is in front of us, is where the street originally was. Followed him to his front door. By this point, the judge knows he's being followed. He's picked up the pace, but he can't get his front door open quickly enough, and Cheesley shot him in the back. Now, Cheesley didn't run away. He just walked out and told the gathered crowd, I have taught to the Lord President how to do justice. So he was he was arrested, he was taken to the toll booth where he was tortured, and the torture was the boot, where you crush the soft tissues of the leg by inserting wooden stakes. He was then executed, but before he was executed, his hand was chopped off, and the pistol was placed round his neck on a chain. Now, since that execution, the people in the Lawn Market and in the Old Town have witnessed a shadowy figure dragging a leg, a ghost with only one arm. They've heard footsteps rushing up behind them and then a pistol shot. They've heard really sort of maniacal laughing behind them, and when you turn round there's nobody there. And this story has been handed down since the 1600s to the point it was ingrained into our psyche. And what parents used to do, if your children were misbehaving, you would tell them, you better watch out or Johnny One Arm will get you. And that was a very well-known story. And the sightings didn't really stop until you get to the 1960s. And in the 1960s, one of the cottages at Dalry where Cheesley owned the land was being restored, and they'd lifted the hearthstone at the fire, and they discovered a skeleton missing a hand with a pistol round its neck on a rusty chain. And at that point they realised that's where Cheesley's body was. He was then buried, and then the sighting stopped. There's actually, why is that not in focus? There we go. So down here, this is Brody's Close. Horses. Well, I'm just going to come back for a second and answer Marianne's thing about the horses. When I was talking about Major Weir, I talked about seeing him and his staff and the lantern being held in front of him. So as he was walking along, the staff would be lantern in front. But the other thing that people have witnessed, not now but back in time, is a horse and carriage with flames coming up the Lawn Market and turning down the West Bow. And that was the horse and carriage for the devil coming to get Weir, Major Weir. So, we do actually have, there's another story further down that involves a headless horseman in a carriage, and everybody thought it was ghosts, and that went on for quite a few years until somebody actually realised that it was actually two guys, and they were disguising themselves and making themselves look like ghosts because we're such a superstitious breed. Nobody would go near them, and they were committing robberies. Now that brings us back on to who I'm about to talk to, So I'm just going to show you up here. We've got Brody's Close, okay? And this is where Deacon William Brody lived. Now, in this close, there is often sightings of a light in a person, like a man. Now, Deacon Brody thought he could cheat death, okay? He thought he could cheat the executioner and live by putting a metal collar around his neck and a metal pipe down his throat and having a doctor on standby. You see, Brody had been a bit of a naughty boy. He was deacon of the guild, which was like head of the union. He had his father had a lot of money, his grandfather had a lot of money, and he inherited a vast sum for the time. But unfortunately, he wasn't the man his father or grandfather were, and he went through his family fortune very, very quickly because he liked to drink, he liked to gamble, and he liked women. So yes, but he was the head of the guild, which is like head of the union, and he had this social status to maintain. So what he used to do is he'd go into your property as he measured up to make furniture. Once he'd finished, he would have a little chat with you, lean against your key, which was usually at the back of the door on a nail, and he'd have a piece of wax in his hand. He would then get an impression of the key and have a copy made by his friend. So that's Deacon Brody's Tavern just across the road there. Okay? So for about 5 years, he let himself into people's properties at night, took what he wanted, lock up, and went home. So people thought they were being robbed by ghosts. So yes, he finally got caught, and he was executed on the gallows that he designed for the city. Now he's thought, like I say, he thought he could escape death by... Sorry, this is really loud. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cause a little bit of I'm trying to get you a postcard here. I know it's not a postcard tour, but this is a beautiful shot. So I think we'll just take a little detour. There we go. So I'm just going to stand there so you can get it here, and then I'm going to cross back over. So yeah, anyway. Now, because he was executed, he wasn't, the doctor on standby couldn't revive him. His plan hadn't worked. So he was angry when he died, and there we go, people. I'm just going to let you see that. The light you're seeing through the open crown spire is the moon. So yes, so his angry ghost can be seen with rope burns on his neck, carrying a canteen and holding a large bunch of keys. And it's seen very often in that close that I just showed you. So yes, that's the story. That's a brief version of the Deacon Brody story. That's absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? We're doing really well. Right. Now, you might hear St Giles, the bells are just going. Just ahead of us, we have the city chambers. Now, the city chambers is quite famous because it's built on top of 3 old streets. It's a full wolf moon. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, sorry, this is St Giles. Sorry, St Giles Cathedral. It isn't actually a cathedral, it's the High Kirk, but that's a long story, and I'll tell you that on another tour. Sorry, I get carried away. Anyway, so Mary King's Close, which is just ahead of us. Once we get across the road, we'll be on the right side for it. The city chambers is built on top of the bottom end of 3 closes. Now, in the 1990s, a renowned Japanese psychic, I'm going to try and say her name, and I apologise if I get this wrong, Aiko Yibo, came to visit Mary King's Close, and when she stepped inside a room off Allen's Close, she became she could barely go into it. It was a 17th century room, and because of the pain and unhappiness she felt there, she said, "I could not enter the room. It is too strong. There is a child beside me. Her little hand is clutching my trouser leg. I just cannot go into this room." She was separated from her parents. Excuse me. She wants to go home and see her family. Her desire haunts this place. Now, you can imagine that was quite a shock for everyone. Nobody was expecting her to say anything like that. So eventually Gabble was able to enter the room. She communicated with the little girl's spirit, and near the fireplace is where she kind of found the presence to speak to the little girl, or to communicate with her. Her name was Annie, and she'd lost her doll and was heartbroken. So Gibo purchased a new doll for Annie, which apparently brought her comfort. And as long as the doll remains in the room will never again be disturbed by the spirit. It won't feel sad, overwhelming grief. Mary King's Close. So, so she went in and she bought the doll. Now, there is another story with Mary King's Close, and I'm just this is the front of the city chambers, okay, and this is the entrance, or the shop of Mary King's Close. Anyway, so underneath this building is where the 3 streets are, and this is where the little girl is. Now, there's been a recent sighting in the Close that's not Annie. It's actually a tall, dark dressed man has been spotted in there as well. And that was actually caught by a TikToker I'm not into TikTok at the moment. I've not actually learned anything about it yet. But anyway, he'd made a video, and people watching the video started commenting about this man standing under one of the arches, and another comment was about a shadowy figure walking by one of the doors. So there's a lot going on in Mary King's Close. Look at the moon. It's beautiful. Now, oh, that's definitely not a ghost, that's just an idiot. Sometimes you just wish you had a stick that you could shove in their spokes. You'll be here in March, you're going to love it. Now, the Scotsman newspaper was printed on North Bridge, which is just ahead of us, and round the corner. We've not actually got time to go down to it. But the Scotsman newspaper, the building has been turned into a hotel. Now, in the basement of the hotel, several members of staff have commented that they've seen a man wearing an old-fashioned printer's apron and carrying trays of metal blocks, and he's been spotted in the basement several times, and there's also another phantom that keeps appearing, which is a woman dressed in black, and she haunts what was the former reception area of the hotel, and that's just round the corner ahead of us here. So yeah, the printer's quite a famous one because he's been spotted by so many people that I'm just going to quickly show you down this close. You can understand why people think, it is quite creepy. And you could see a shadow there and you'd be jumping out your skin. So yes, honestly, it's lovely though. Edinburgh's beautiful. Now across the way there's actually the Clamshell, that fish and chip shop, the blue facade. Next door to it is actually a tiny little close, and in there we have the ghost of the White Lady. So we had the grey lady at the castle, we've got the White Lady here. Now this ghost is a woman whose husband came back early from a business trip and discovered her with her male friend, and her husband murdered them both, lay them down in the bed, locked the bedroom door, came out of the house, locked the front door, and never went back. 21 years later, somebody opened up the doors, and as he went into the bedroom, the lady sat up in the bed, slipped her legs over the edge, and sort of sailed past him through the door. And he nearly, you can imagine the fright that would give you. So yes. And she's been seen in the corridors of that close. So that's the White Lady, Mrs. Guthrie. So there we've got the moon again. It looks like a Scooby-Doo moon now. So yeah. Now, just ahead of us we have the South Bridge vaults. So the South Bridge is running that way. And again, there's so many stories here to tell that we could just stand and do an hour on that. But I'll get on to it. So the South Bridge vaults were opened in the sort of the 18th century, just to give you a bit of a background to it. And they were initially for kind of like storage and workshops. However, around 1795, a flood led to most of the sort of people that were working there leaving, and they were abandoned. Eventually they became home for the poorest people in society, and less legal trades, if you understand my meaning. And there have been countless paranormal experiences associated with the vaults. People hear someone whispering in their ear, others feel cold, gusts of wind, even though there isn't any really sort of air movement, if you know what I mean, down there. One of the most menacing ghosts, the vaults, there's been so many paranormal investigations down there, and lots of them have been filmed and recorded and that kind of thing. The most menacing person or ghost is Mr. Boots. He's described as an unkempt man who wears high boots, hence the name, Mr. Boots. He likes to lurk at the back of the vaults, He throws rocks at unsuspecting visitors. He has also been known to push people over. People have also heard him walking on the cobbles and his voice echoing from one chamber in the distance saying, "Get out, out," that kind of thing. Another ghost is Jack. He likes to hold visitors' hands. Ooh, no, seriously. Something grabbed the leg of your pants. That's horrible. Oh, that would just frighten the life out of me. Now, I did say I was going to tell you a little. That's just a little bit about the vaults. Like I say, there is so much going on down there. It's just terrifying. But on the other side, that's South Bridge that we're looking at. Okay. On this side, we have North Bridge. Okay. Now, just ahead of us, I'm going to see where the bus is. The building behind that bus was called the Carlton Highland Hotel. And when I was 16, I did a youth training scheme there as a chef, a commie chef. What do you do with somebody that can't read? Oh, we make them cook. Now, underneath this road are arches because I'm standing on the bridge. This is where it starts. And the ladies' changing room for the kitchen staff was under one of these arches. So when you went into the room, it had an arch ceiling, and the back wall had, there was lockers down both sides and at the back. And at the back wall, the lockers went across, but there was gaps either side because of the curve of the wall coming down. And behind the lockers there was actually this big stone shelf. It was about 2 foot deep and about 2 foot high. So what I used to do, because I was 16, young and embarrassed easy, so I would stand in that little gap back in the day when I had a figure, and I would get changed. And I put my bag on the shelf and I would get changed. And I did that every day. And then one day I went in, there was no one else in the changing room. I'm standing in this little gap. I've got my clothes down on this shelf. I'm standing in my brand pants, my knickers, like underwear. And I just happened to glance along the back of the back of the lockers, and there was a man. And I got such a fright. I ran out of the changing room in my brand pants and ran straight into the head chef. So he obviously calmed me down and went in there like a bull to kill this man who'd been peeping Tomming in the ladies' changing room, only to come back out and tell me there was no one in that room. The only person that was in that room is me. The only way in and out of that room was the door that I came out of. So, yeah, I never went back. I got my stuff, I left, I never went back. So that's my experience. Yes. Now, just down Nidri Street, there's a couple of pubs. Now, remember I said that's the South Bridge there, okay? So that's running. It's got 19 arches going that way. And as we look down here, we can see where the bridge isn't, right? So you've got the arches, the road's relatively flattish, and here we have a valley, okay? So there's a couple of pubs that back on. Actually, no, I'm going to just come back across because I don't want to get involved with drunk people. Right, so built into part of the South Bridge down here is Whistle Binkies in Nidri Street. Now, Whistle Binkies has its fair share of ghosts. There have been various sightings by staff and customers of a Highland man named Walter. Sorry, a highwayman named Walter, and he's a ghostly figure wearing riding boots, a tree-corn hat. The Watcher is said to haunt other parts of the vaults as well. The Watcher and Mr. Boots are they're the same spirit. So the Watcher and Mr. Boots, it's two different names, but we think it's the same guy because he likes to watch and he has big boots. So that's Whistle Binkies. Now there's also the Banshee's Labyrinth down here. Now a banshee, banshees are very common in Ireland, but we also have them here. Oh, sorry, somebody asked me. Oh, have I missed a question? Sorry. Right, sorry. If you throw the question at me now, I'll answer it before I get onto the Banshee's Labyrinth. Oh, it's all good. Right, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I should have probably explained at the beginning. Right, okay. Banshee's Labyrinth is further down the street. I'll cross over now because those guys have moved on. Just let you have a wee look down. I'm not going to go right down just because of the signal. The blue lights up here, that one says let's talk about art maybe. It's like neon and we can't really see it because we're too close now, but oh, it's just changed colour. But there's actually, see that arm sticking out of the building, so it's got this lovely blue light shining up it. It's really pretty. So the Banshee's Labyrinth claims to be Scotland's most haunted pub, right? So it's just down here. It's a bold claim because we have lots of pubs that are haunted, but it has some really sort of eerie stories to it. There was a group of workmen who were grafting away when they heard the sound of a young woman sobbing. Now the pub was shut and they were the only ones in the pub, so there shouldn't have been anybody in there sobbing. And as they turned around to face the way the noise was coming from, they saw this young woman with her head in her hands. She was sobbing away, and as the men approached her, she lifted her head, she lifted her head and she showed this gaunt white face and a pair of bare eye sockets. Now she then let out this blood-curdling scream which caused the men to flee from the building as fast as they could. Now within a few hours, one of the men received a phone call to inform him of the death of a close family member. Now banshee screams, these are heralds for the death of a family member. You'll find this all the way through Irish mythology and Scottish mythology. Yes, so a banshee is sort of a woman of the fairies, or sometimes she's called a ban Scythe or Seath, I can't remember how to say it. And it's Celtic folklore, and the Scots and the Irish kind of have quite a common connection when it comes to these things. So yes, you've got the Banshee's Labyrinth down there as well. Not my idea of fun. It's supposed to be quite a nice place actually, for a night out. Now just across the road you have the Mitre pub. Now the Mitre, oops, I'm just going to watch the traffic first and get across. Okay, so we're kind of halfway down the Royal Mile, just in case anybody's wondering where we are. We're in the High Street, and this is the ghost of a 17th century archbishop. Now he actually lived here centuries ago, and his ghost refused to leave. Now the ghost has been witnessed by bar staff, contractors over the years. In 1993, when a team of electricians started working, they suffered electrical shocks from the appliances. Now what's unusual about that is the appliances weren't actually plugged in. Yeah. Now the ghost is said to be very protective of the jukebox, and will turn it off if he doesn't like the music. The engineer has replaced parts and reported being pushed in the back and thrown to the floor. So yes, the Archbishop is not a happy bunny. He doesn't like people coming in. Oh, I've just realised, coming into his pub and messing with his music. I'll let you have I'm not going to go right in. I'm just going to let you have a quick little look through the door there. And there you go. Right, I seem to have run out of time there. Sorry about that. I thought I was on time, but I've gone over my time again. Not too badly, so that's all right. But yes, thank you everyone that came. I'm really sorry if I missed any questions. I didn't see it in the chat. Now, if you've got any questions, you can throw them at me now. I'll quite happily answer them. Thanks. I mean, the thing is, the stories are fantastic, and they're all real, as in that, people have reported them, have experienced them. You'll always find an explanation for something if you want to, but sometimes, like that guy I saw, I will never ever be able to explain it. I don't understand it. I don't know, how it happened, but yeah, someday somebody will probably come up and say, oh well, there was a vibration in the air or something, Oh, thanks. I think this is only the second time I've done it, so my rhythm wasn't quite right. But yeah, it's fun to do. And thank you everybody that came along. I really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it too. Thanks for everyone that's left a tip. Oh, it was wonderful. Thank you. And thanks everyone who's followed me. Yeah, and if you want to leave reviews, that's the other thing I forgot to mention at the beginning. It's in 2 parts. The first part is about the technical side, you know, the signal, the sound, that kind of thing. And the second part is about the guide. Oh, sorry, that went too fast. Oh, thank you. Right, everyone, thanks. Sorry, I'm just keeping you on while I walk down to my husband. It's just, yeah, I've got to go down to my husband. Actually, I've got part 4. You know how I've got the darker side tours, Haunting Tales of the Dark Side. Part 4 is the next section down, and there's some interesting ghost stories there as well. So yeah, but that's also got murder and stuff in it too. But yes, thank you. I will have a great evening. And yeah, it was nice to come out. Now that I've gotten over the cold, it's quite a nice night. Yeah. Oh, please, I can't. Honestly, I never thought in this day and age I would have a problem trying to find a washing machine, you know? Anyway. Oh, thank you. Right, bye everyone. Okay, bye.